From the earliest days in Congress, Gingrich was never the hardcore conservative enemy of the establishment's drive for big government, even world government.
I was surprised and disappointed to hear Newt Gingrich last week criticize the Republicans in the House of Representatives for even considering changes to Medicare. He called it a right-wing social engineering, and he likened it to President Obama's left-wing social engineering, which would have made the federal government, that would be you, America, the sole payer for all health care in the country. Then the former Speaker of the House went on to restate a view he has apparently held for some time, that the government does possess the constitutional authority to compel everyone to purchase health care coverage. This is the same Newt Gingrich who is now seeking the Republican nomination for president.
I've said consistently, we ought to have some requirement. You either have health insurance or you post a bond, or in some way you indicate you're going to be held accountable.
But that is the individual mandate, is it not?
It's a variation. I don't think right-wing social engineering is any more desirable than left-wing social engineering. I don't think imposing radical change from the right or the left is a very good way for a free society to operate.
And Paul Ryan responded with this in an interview: with allies like that, who needs the left? Charles, how big a deal is this?
This is a big deal. He's done. He didn't have a big chance from the beginning, but now it's over.
Mr. Speaker, you were a prominent supporter of the Medicare prescription drug plan that President Bush signed into law in 2003. The Medicare trustees now say that plan is $7.2 trillion in unfunded liabilities over the next 75 years. Do you regret your support for the plan looking back?
No. Medicare was designed in the 1960s when pharmaceutical drugs were not a significant part of how you took care of people. And for us to have a government-run health plan that said, we're not going to help you with insulin, but we'll be glad to pay for kidney dialysis, is an utterly anti-human provision.
There is no medical marijuana.
Let's take a look at the Gingrich performance right from his earliest days in Congress. The September 19, 1979 Constitution-based conservative index shows he's in line to be Speaker of the House. What does he do? He acquiesces in the convening of a lame duck session of Congress. Then he uses his considerable muscle to have Congress pass an important measure leading to the demise of this nation's sovereignty, much deeper involvement for the United States in GATT. He has already helped to get NAFTA passed. In both of these efforts, he stood shoulder to shoulder with Bill Clinton. Early in 1994, Newt Gingrich testified before the House Ways and Means Committee. Listen to what he said about the plan to expand GATT's powers. Quote, "We need to be honest about the fact that we are transferring from the United States significant authority to a new organization. This is a transformational moment. This is not just another trade agreement. This is a very big transfer of power." End quote. GATT has established a gigantic bureaucracy called the World Trade Organization, which is now the sole interpreter of 20,000 pages of trade regulations for 120 nations. This WTO essentially has life and death authority over America's economic interests.
Why have we not been hit by since 9/11, which is a good question. My first answer is I honestly don't know. I would have expected another attack. The better they've done at making sure there isn't an attack, the easier it is to say, well, there was never going to be an attack anyway. And it's almost like they should every once in a while have allowed an attack to get through just to remind us.
I mean, the American people seem to want us out of Iraq now.
Well, look, I think any rational person would like us to find a way to not have young Americans getting killed. And I think that the challenge is to explain candidly to the American people how much bigger the larger war with the irreconcilable wing of Islam is, and that Iraq is a very small part of that, just as Afghanistan is a very small part of it.
You're now in charge. What's our next step?
I think the first step is you put enormous direct pressure on Iran to quit interfering. You tell the Saudis you're not going to tolerate them financing terrorism, and you tell the Syrians you're not going to allow them to have any more terrorists come through Syria to go to Iraq to kill Americans, and that you're prepared to do what it takes.
That is, there was an axis of evil: Iran, Iraq, North Korea. Well, we're 1 out of 3. And people ought to think about that. If Bush was right in January of 2002, and by the way, virtually the entire Congress gave him a standing ovation when he said it, then why is it that the other 2 parts of the axis of evil are still busily, cheerfully making nuclear weapons?
In the past, you've called for the bombing of Iran's oil refineries.
No, I haven't. I've called for sabotage, not bombing.
Forgive me. Sabotage, not bombing.
Sure. The fundamental difference. What I've said is you should use covert operations because they only have 1 refinery that produces gasoline in the entire country.
And so sabotaging oil refineries rather than bombing them.
The only purpose of sabotaging them would be to create a gasoline-led crisis to try to replace the regime. I mean,
which you can precipitate by provoking a gas crisis with black ops sabotage?
Well, I think that would be
like that's a scenario that you have suggested here.
Look, I think that's one piece out of many.
You said the North Koreans should not be allowed to fire a missile and that the U.S., quote, should take whatever preemptive actions are necessary. Are you saying that President Gingrich would have taken out that missile on the launch pad?
Yes, I'm saying we do not appreciate the scale of threat that is evolving on the planet, and North Korea is a totally irresponsible dictatorship run by a person who is clearly out of touch with reality.
But when news outlets fire off questions at him about how he feels about Libya, it seems as if, well, Newt's been a little bit confused. Check out his response to Libya on Fox News on March 8th.
The United States doesn't need anybody's permission. We don't need to have NATO, who frankly won't bring much to the fight. We don't need to have the United Nations. All we have to say is that we think that slaughtering your own citizens is unacceptable and that we're intervening, and we don't have to.
All right, so Newt sounded like he was all for intervention there. But watch what happened when he did an interview on NBC's The Today Show just a few days later on March 23rd.
I would not have intervened. I think there were a lot of other ways to affect Gaddafi. I think there are a lot of allies in the region that we could have worked with. I would not have used American and European forces.
Wait a minute. So now Newt is against intervention? Looks like Newt was all for the no-fly zone until Obama actually implemented it. So now, of course, he has to be against it.
I was happy to see that Newt Gingrich has staked out a position on the war. A position or 2 or maybe 3, I don't know. He may have more war positions than he's had wives.
I asked you if the rumors were true that you were in an affair with a woman, obviously who wasn't your wife, at the same time that Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky were having their escapade.
Well, the fact is that the honest answer is yes.
Newt Gingrich is praising his longtime political rival, Hillary Rodham Clinton. Mr. Speaker, this isn't only in America, but welcome to the show, of course.
Great to be with you
Mr.
again.
Speaker, Julian Assange, is he a hero to freedom, or is he a terrorist who should be prosecuted?
He is an active enemy combatant who is engaged in information warfare against the United States.
As the Supreme Court says, Assange is protected as long as what he distributes is in the public interest. Clearly, this is in the public interest. We are fascinated with it. Some of it's good, some of it's bad.
No,
much of it is secret, some of it is meaningless.
It's not in the public interest.
It's not in the public interest to know that we're killing people in Yemen. It's not in the public interest to know that Hillary Clinton dispatched agents to steal the credit card numbers of foreign diplomats.
No.
Okay.
We're in the middle of a war.
But the public interest is defined by the court as that which is newsworthy. It is newsworthy to know these things because you and I and people like us have been talking about nothing but this for the past week.
You and I have a different standard.
What are we to think when Newt Gingrich, the supposed alternative to a revolutionary Bill Clinton, joins the president in New Hampshire in June of 1995 for a love feast debate where not one of Mr. Clinton's many deficiencies were aired, instead of using the nationally televised opportunity to point out
Yet, Speaker Gingrich, there's also, I think, a recognition, at least in some of the polls I've seen, that something has to be done.
Sure, look, something has to be done. The question is whether it has to be this. I suspect, were I still in Congress, in the end, George is right, and I probably would end up voting reluctantly yes, because I think when you're given no choice.
Equally as baffling was the former speaker's comments endorsing the heart and soul of Obamacare. Not only is